Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you all here. I was just going to be doing some introductions and getting things going over the course of the next couple of minutes. Really fantastic to have the second leg of the If I Knew Then What I Know Now relay. So having had Catherine Granger do such a great job last week of setting things off for us and doing a handover to Clare Balding, we've got the opportunity now today to see Clare Balding and get into the same conversation that we had with Catherine last week about if I knew then what I know now. And Clare, we will be coming to you in a moment. But yeah, for those of you who know anything about sport and broadcasting in this country, you'll know that Clare has been an absolute stalwart of the broadcasting world over the last, let me think, I think 1994 would have been the start of Clare's career, and working in and across so many different broadcasting mediums, from sport to crafts, author, best-selling author as well. The radio broadcast Ramblings, I think, has been going since 1999. And just an absolute pleasure to have someone else from the world of sport, but from a very different lens that Catherine's passed the lens over to. I've just got a little bit of gremlins, which I'm going to deal with. So I'm just going to quickly flick onto a different screen and make sure that we're going to get rid of the sound that is now interrupting, but the gremlins are now gone. Clare, welcome. Thank you so much. How's this week been for you? What's going on for you in the middle of lockdown at the moment?
Do I need to, there we go.
Yeah, there you go.
Luckily, I've got two big writing projects that I am working on. So there's quite a lot of mental stimulation and also a fair bit of structure to the day, because I have to sit at the desk and write at least something every day. But also I've been taking my fitness quite seriously. Okay. So I'm doing various Pilates sessions. I was doing couch to 5K, and then the ligaments in my right ankle gave out. So rather disappointingly, I've put that on hold. I want to try and go back to it, but put it on hold and doing more Pilates. And now the golf course has opened. Right. At least my treat, if I've written enough, my treat is to play golf once or twice a week. So. Yeah,
that's good. I managed to do one of Joe Wicks's PE lessons with my 6-year-old and sort of strained something. So fortunately, that baton's been handed over to my wife. So I kind of, you know, the desire to try some new things in this time sort of.
I think interesting. I mean, Joe Wicks, what a superstar he is. But I think a lot of people, I mean, obviously they are hit routines and they're quite active, and if there's no warm up involved, you're going to do yourself a bit of damage. And I found in the first week he actually he realised it, because lots of middle-aged men were trying it, and middle-aged women, and suffering. And so he then put a bit of warm up into it. But yeah, they are fun, and I do that just to mix things up every now and again.
Yeah, great. And you take a couple of writing projects at the moment as well to keeping you busy?
Yeah, one for children actually, which is sort of, it's an interesting theme, because it's quite a lot of what we would learn from sport. So every chapter is a different quality that you're trying to perfect, and a bit like you looking back on life once you know what you know and you've made the mistakes you've made. how could you have applied yourself better if you had learned patience, for example,
Right.
or courage, or teamwork, or kindness, those kind of themes and examples in my life where I know I've got it wrong, but also examples where I think one thing my dad in a way taught me, who was sort of crazy brave. I mean, almost not really brave because he never felt fear, so he just did things.
Right.
But
Yeah.
he said to my brother and I when we were very young that we had to fall off 100 times before we'd be proper jockeys.
Mm-hmm.
So we fell off every day because we wanted to be proper jockeys, you know, and we were always falling off. And it's that, so it's called fall off, get on, keep going, you know. And once you get into your head that you can fall and survive, you actually you're not frightened of it. So in a weird way, you're less likely to fall. And I think it's the same with perceived failure. Once you accept you're going to make mistakes, and once you go, all right, I can recover from that, and I can, you know, with live television, I'm going to make a mistake. Of course I am. And as long as I go, hands up, I've made a mistake. I'm so sorry. I just said that stupid thing there. Actually, I noticed Graham Norton do it the other night on the Eurovision program. And he led into somebody and he said, oh, this guy works as a Robbie Williams impersonator. And he said, I think it's this guy. And it clearly wasn't that guy. But he left it and then waited until it was the guy who, and then said it again. He said, well, or not that other person that I said, you know, and I thought, oh, good on you, Graham, because that's exactly how to do it well, and to do it with a bit of charm and a bit of class. And you don't take it too seriously, but you just go, oh, I just made a mistake there, but never mind. This is the one.
Yeah, and it's been interesting, a lot of the psychology work that I've done as well. When you start talking to people about the actual control you can take by choosing to fail deliberately, you know, the thing that you're fearing happening, you could do deliberately if you wanted to, if I incentivized you enough. How does that change the thought process if we start saying, look, you know, you can actually deliberately do this, but you actually want to do this, so how can we change some of the choices?
Yeah, it's interesting. In television, we don't have the benefit of coaches, and there's very little feedback. So even when you're starting, if you ask for feedback, I don't know whether it's because people are frightened of saying something that then could be held against them, you know, or whether it's that nobody really knows. It's this mysterious magic formula that makes things work. But it's not actually. I think there are very strong basics that if you've got them in position, if the gallery talkback, for example, is disciplined, if people are being supportive, if your research is good and accurate and you can trust it, if you're given time to, you know, to think of what's coming next, all of those things are pretty basic, are going to help you do a better job. And if in yourself you're constantly striving to get better, and I do think that's pretty key. I think it's quite easy sometimes to sit back a little bit and go, well, I've got autocue. Well, we don't have autocue in live sport, but in some way I've got autocue, it's all right. Yeah. Well, that's not. You've got to think it. You've got to feel it.
Different skill sets, I guess, aren't they? You know, one where, you know, with a live broadcast versus an autocue, they're different skills. Get great at either of them, but you know, still have the ability underneath to, you know, if the autocue fails, you know, you've got somewhere else to go because of the skill that you've got. I guess, you know, for me, it is like the athletes where they've got different situations, different versions of the game, but they have to be ready to play them all.
Yes. Important. Yes. And then in a way, not giving yourself I remember when I moved from radio into television, radio is, I love radio, and it's very, I find it very natural, and you can free range and you can be quite loose with it. In television, particularly in the old days when there was a 3-second roll on a tape, you had to cue that tape with the words that you had told them you were going to say.
Yeah.
There wasn't the scope to just suddenly go off on a tangent. The timings are tighter. There's quite a lot going on in your ear because you're hearing camera directions as well. So it is a more difficult skill. And then there is the added element of a watching public. So what you look like is important in terms of looking neat and tidy, and how you are with your body, and how your chemistry really, I guess, with both the audience and with whoever you're presenting with or interviewing. Yeah. And all those elements do come into it. So it is a bit more of a complicated beast.
Yeah. I love these kind of conversations. There's a couple of things we've done called Performance Fest Lounge Live, where I've interviewed a bomb disposal army major, an actor, a couple of members of London Grammar, emergency medicine surgeon, defense lawyers. and the geekery of their art, and again, we're getting beneath the surface of how invested people are to become absolutely, just amazingly informed and focused and constantly developing in their art and unpicking that stuff. There's so much more to everything that meets the eye, and just hearing all of the additional stuff, you start understanding the complexity of delivering a really sort of amazing in front of camera performance, as well as whatever the radio version is of that as well. And it's fascinating just hearing that as well. And you said you love radio. Does that remain your favorite medium, or
I mean, I don't do a lot of it anymore. I do ramblings and have done for 20 years, and we're just at the moment, actually, because I can't go out and walk with strangers yet. It might be possible before the end of this run, actually, but we're putting together various highlights programs, and so I'm listening back to programs I recorded 10 or 15 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
And it's really lovely, actually, because I can visualize where I was and listening again to those people. They really share things with you when you're walking with, and it's a very satisfying way of interviewing somebody, because you've got a brilliant experience. You're looking at this fabulous view. You're in a part of the country that quite often I haven't been to, and they know more about it than you do. So you're learning, but also people will tell you things, after 2 hours walking, people will tell you things that they've never told anybody. And I find that an immense privilege. I really enjoy that. And because I think radio is so intimate, the way people listen to it is it's very personal to them. They're quite often listening in their car, or they're listening on headphones, or they're listening in the kitchen. They might stop what they're doing if something gets very intense or emotional. And I think also I work with a really lovely producer as well, and she's very, very good at almost the person I'm walking with forgets that she's there. So there's a microphone in between us on a long boom. And Karen, my producer, is walking just behind and always says to them, don't turn around to look at me. Just look forward or look at Claire. And they forget. I think they forget they're being recorded, or are prepared to share in a way that they know might help somebody else. I did a really interesting one recently with a therapist, with a counsellor, who does all of her consultations outside walking.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And that for some people, I think, is very, very beneficial.
Yeah, well, I guess there's all the mindfulness that comes with that, as well as the outdoor space, and a lot of the kind of the freedom of space, rather than the sort of the formality of an office, and the kind of I guess there's lots of perceptions we have of how that relationship goes if we're in an office and being counselled, rather than out for a walk in the open air with people. So it's interesting knowing you're reflecting on that, because obviously this is all about if I knew then what I know now. And the fact you've been reflecting, sort of listening back to the ramblings, I'm interested in terms of, when we started talking and we said, right, we're going to talk about if you knew then what you know now. What period did you go to? Where do you want to take this conversation around, for you, and making it relevant?
Yeah, I would probably go back to, in many ways, 2012 was the complete sort of gear change in my career. Right. But actually, it's what I'd learned before 2012 that put me in a position there where I think I could present in a much more authentic way, and in a sense wasn't trying to prove too much that what I knew. And I think I think particularly with female broadcasters, because we get criticised a lot more when we make mistakes. I think there's a tendency early on, and I think this might be true across a lot of careers, there's a tendency to try to show all your work. Look at all the homework I've done, look at how much I know. I need to prove to you that I know all of this stuff. So instead of in an interview listening to the answer and actually taking it off on a different track if you need to, and not necessarily using all your homework in all the one go, you can be much more confident about it. And it's a different kind of confidence. It's not a confidence that comes on camera and goes, hey, here I am, I can do this. It's a quieter confidence that says, I know that I know my subject. I don't need to prove to you that I know it, but during the course of the next 5 hours over this program, you'll see that I do. And I guess the difference in a way as well was knowing to ask questions to which I didn't necessarily know the answer, that I was genuinely asking. And certainly when I did the swimming, I had done quite a lot of swimming presentation up to that point. And probably I did know more, and I knew more of the British swimmers knew me and I knew them. But it was, there was a lot to learn, and I was fascinated by it. So I would ask Mark Foster about the technicalities, like you wanting to know the inner workings. How does this happen? How, when you're doing butterfly, what is the difference between Michael Phelps's stroke and Chad le Clos' stroke? And why is Chad capable of beating him when nobody expected him to? But then also opening yourself up to the emotional side of it. So understanding that the most important thing to do in the wake of that race was give Chad the credit for winning, not just talk about why Michael Phelps hadn't done what we all expected him to do, and then talk more about Chad by getting his dad on, which was a bit of a stroke of luck, but also knowing what would work on, or what I hoped would work on live TV.
Yeah, and that's fascinating, and I remember those broadcasts as well, because actually there was great rapport between sort of you and Mark in there as well, and Becky Adlington was in there as well.
Becky was still swimming, actually.
Still
Becky
swimming, okay.
Yeah.
Right, so but the sort of rapport that you kind of had, sort of, there was the swimming bubble that was being created, and it was kind of, giving everyone a sort of a window into what was going on in a way that felt different to some of the other venues, I think.
Yeah, and actually in Rio in 2016, I did the cycling at the velodrome with Chris Hoy. And again, he's so, both he and Mark, and most co-hosts and the expert analysts that I've worked with, they love being asked questions about their sport. They actually love to explain it to you. And they know that I'm doing it from a point of genuine interest. So I said to Chris at one point, look, this might be a stupid question. And it was just before the Keirin. I think it was before the Keirin, which is, when the Derny spins off and then they all kind of, it's tactical racing, but it's essentially sprinting. And I asked why they didn't have wing mirrors, because they're constantly looking around at each other. And I thought that could be quite a strain on the neck and be quite dangerous. And he said, there's no such thing as a stupid question, and explained to me why, because of wind resistance and all sorts. But they actually had looked into whether they could put any sort of reflective equipment, would it be useful to put some kind of reflective strip on the handlebar bar somewhere? Could you do it? So it was really interesting that you ask what you think is a bit of a daft question and actually get a really long involved answer. That of course they've looked at that, and this is why it wouldn't work. And it was great. It was really fun.
And you said at the beginning of the sort of going back to 2012, that sense of previously having to prove yourself. And I'm always interested in that concept, because actually, as a driver for people, proving yourself, for a lot of people, the need to please is a very powerful one if you can harness it in the right way. And so did you get more comfortable with who you needed to prove yourself to, or how you needed to prove yourself? Was there a shift, do you think?
Yes, I think in the beginning it was very straightforward, and I'm sure this is true for a lot of people. You're basically trying to prove to your parents that you can do the job that they certainly told me I couldn't do. So there is that, and that I had chosen to live. My parents, my brother still lives at home, essentially in the house we grew up in. He trains racehorses. That is the family business. I think when I made the choice to go to London, and I don't think they were disapproving of working outside racing. I don't think, or outside of a rural setting. I don't think that was an issue. I just think it was a bit of a shock that suddenly I was going to go and do something that seemed to draw so much attention to myself. Now, that wasn't the driving force at all. I never actually wanted to be well known. I've never wanted to be famous. I have wanted to be financially independent, and that's always been a driver. And then when I found something I loved so much, essentially, I believe it's storytelling, and it's storytelling around sport, and it's trying to do that well. Then I wanted to do it. I wasn't arrogant enough to think I want to do this better than anyone else has done it before. I think I just wanted to do it really well. If I'm going to do it where people say that's a professional approach. That's somehow that works. That makes sense. So it was never really about it probably should have been more about, I mean, as you can tell, I haven't had a haircut for a long time. It probably should have been more about what my hair looked like, what I was wearing, how I presented myself. But actually that's, you know, that doesn't really interest me other than not being a distraction. I'd quite like to turn up and people not go, what the hell is she wearing? That it's not a distraction, but what really interests me is the process of the program making and being involved from a creative point of view, being respected for my opinions, being allowed to have an open conversation, to feedback honestly. If I think, and I work with some producers who are so good at that, they're so collaborative. I work with some who are not, and you have to slightly pretend everything is their idea to make it get done. But you know, it's an interesting process, and I like being part of a team, and I like making a program that I'm proud of. So whether it's Crufts or Crufts is great actually, because Crufts demands an awful lot. It's a long, you know, those are long programs. The afternoons are slightly different to the evening. You have to retain a lot of information. It's quite unpredictable because you're working with live animals. There are lots of elements to it, and I'm on, switched on all the way through, and I love that. You know, the Olympics similarly, it's a stamina test as much as it is a knowledge test. And those are, you know, that to me is fun. I really, really enjoy it far more than I think I ever realized when I set out. But yeah, I was trying to prove myself to my parents, and then you have a slightly different set of, you know, you're trying to prove yourself to your boss that you're capable of hosting, you know, a show at the Olympics, and then are you capable of hosting the opening ceremony and the primetime shows, and then are you capable of doing, you know, you have to, and sometimes you're going to get knockbacks, and it happens, you know, and it is about how you roll with the punches a bit.
Yeah, and was there anything that shifted for you around 2012 then, in terms of this sort of, you know, the changing, you know, the proving of yourself shifting, and sort of you having that greater confidence and authenticity, and that just, you know, I guess you've got a decent body of work behind you at that point as well, but was there anything else that had shifted?
Yeah, I think also what had shifted from 2000 to 2004. So I always think in Olympic cycles. So from Sydney in 2000 to 2004 in Beijing. In
Athens 2004, Beijing.
Exactly, in Athens and then Beijing. I'd met Alice, and we were in a relationship that was certainly not going to be hidden. And I think that was it had been a big fear. I shouldn't have feared it as much, but it's a weird thing, you know, when you're gay, you have to somehow, you're expected to make some public statement to the world, even if you have done to your friends and your parents and what have you, that somehow this is meant to be, it sometimes feels there's a lot more attention than it merits, but equally, I think there's been a lot of change since then, since the early 2000s. I think the landscape has changed a lot, and I am relieved at that. I mean, actually, take Mark Foster as a case in point, and Colin Jackson, neither of whom came out until relatively recently, and that's because of a stigma and a sense of shame and a sense that this is not acceptable and this will work against me, which actually, in my case, the absolute reverse was true. I think I became a much nicer person and a much better presenter for being authentic. And Billie Jean King always talks about being my authentic self. It is different when you suddenly can talk about your partner. You can share your love and your relationship with your friends. That makes a massive difference. And when you feel that you can't, your relationship isn't validated in the same way, and that can make you behave in a slightly, you know, defensive way. And I think that shift made me much more open and maybe more vulnerable, because I didn't have a suit of armor on anymore. And also, I think I understand why people think, and you look at men's football and how there isn't a single out gay footballer, and it just doesn't make sense if you believe in the percentages. Anyway, and it just doesn't really make sense. But I understand why people stay in the closet. But all I would say to them is, by doing that, you do increase the sense of shame. You yourself are saying, this is something I'm ashamed of. This is why I'm not sharing it. And I have been so much happier for not thinking that.
Yeah. No, I can see that. And I'm interested because, you know, I think with a lot of, you know, it's Mental Health Awareness Week, and we kind of talk a lot about that stuff. You know, there's one of the sort of thinking errors that's often talked about, which is mind reading, assuming that you know other people's perspective and what they're going to say, and actually using that as the truth to determine your path forward. And I want, were you mind reading on behalf of other people in that period? And then have you found out sort of very different stuff since?
Yes, definitely. And I think also you can be, part of that mind reading is you can be controlled by what you, it is the same thing. You can be controlled by what you think other people think.
Yeah.
Now, I have referred to that as being, I wanted to shift from being the object in the sentence of my life to being the subject of the sentence, i.e. I am going to control this. What do I think? What do I think? Not just of myself, but what do I think of other people? How do I relate to other people? And as soon as you can do that, in a way, you've turned the camera out rather than in. Yeah. Rather than go, oh my God, what does everybody think about me? You're going, well, what do I think about them? And how can I help, actually? And that makes a big difference. And I think that's, you know, I talk to kids quite a lot about this, about I understand the generation that we now exist in, and it is about taking selfies, although taking selfies with other people might be a bit more complicated now with social distancing. So there we go. But rather than put myself in the front of the picture of a landscape, I'd rather look at the landscape and take a photo of the landscape. So it's just going, all right, not about me, about this. And that's definitely what I did before London 2012, definitely. I said, right, okay, I'm not one of the key presenters here, which was quite a big disappointment at the time, but I am going to be reporting on swimming, which I love and I enjoy. I'll be doing that morning and evening. There's going to be long days. I can do that. I'll then be off to other events and do open water swimming and boxing. I did Nicola Adams. I'll go to Greenwich, I'll do the show jumping, which would be great, and the dressage, fantastic. I'm going to enjoy this, and I'm going to make it all about the event and the competitors. This is not about me. Yeah. And that's how I coped with feeling a bit, you know, I've been one of the main program presenters in 2008 and 2010, actually. I've been the lead presenter for the Winter Olympics.
Yeah.
And then I suddenly wasn't in 2012. What had I done wrong? And then I thought, okay, no, get over this. This is the only time the Olympics are going to be in your country, in your lifetime. It's about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you're speaking, I'm sort of just, you know, thinking back on a lot of the advice around confidence and performance and consistency. And I've often said to a lot of athletes, you know, the reality of confidence is if you can answer the question, am I confident to be myself today? Because I know it will be enough. You know, you've done the groundwork. You know that you're going to back yourself to be confident to be yourself. And it feels to me like that was really sort of starting to happen for you, being confident to be yourself across all those different events in a relatively short space of time, but having some ways of thinking so that you're the consistent factor in an inconsistent environment by the stories that you tell, the way in which you engage. It really feels like there was a kind of an owning of your art.
Yes, and I think an understanding, I could do it on the move. So when I presented the racing for many years for the BBC, I always did it on the move. And when I started presenting Grandstand, traditionally the presenter had been anchored. They were the anchor and they stuck on a fixed cable because it was much more secure for talkback. You could hear more clearly, and a fixed monitor because, again, the picture wouldn't drop out. And I wanted to keep moving. So it was risky because talkback would break up and the screen would break up, but I figured I'll just cope, we'll do this. So when it came to doing, I remember the Winter Olympics in Vancouver, we didn't have the budget to have a studio in the mountains, which we had done in Turin. And we'd been up at, I can't remember what the mountain resort was called now, something beginning with S, but it was lovely. And we'd had this lovely log cabin and super expensive, but beautiful looking. And Hazel and I presented from there. And Sue Barker was down in Turin doing ice skating and things in a different studio. Anyway, come Vancouver, we haven't got the money. They've got a studio in Vancouver, but in the mountains in Whistler, where I am, you're just on your own, get out there, do it. So I'm wandering on the mountain slope, standing, walking, skiers coming flying past me, kid might wander in, a dog might come through shot, you know, anything was happening. Presenting the evening program for our time zone here. And that was like, you know, it felt like we were doing it with a frying pan and a kettle, you know, very Heath Robinson, let's make this work. And I really enjoyed it. And I didn't have a table to put my notes on. I didn't have, you know, by then we had mobile monitors, so but it would break up all the time and it would be slightly delayed. Mm-hmm. But it was fun because I quite liked that edginess. I liked the risk factor. I liked knowing it might all fall off air.
Yeah. So was the sort of, you know, the stuff that you've started learning since 2012, has that crystallized sort of, you know, the confidence for you? Has that crystallized a lot of, you know, you know, you said being authentic and you know.
Yeah. I think what it's given me is a sense. I think before that I was very, very driven, and I still want to do jobs as well as I can, but I think I was driven by the drive, if you know what I mean, and in a sense that, you know, got to prove it. And then after 2012, I think it was more a case of, what do I want to do? I went through a little period of quite stressful. I was doing a lot of things, but I didn't want to give up the things that I had done. So I felt this huge sense of responsibility and I felt quite anxious. And then when I started making choices about, no, I won't do that, actually, I only want to do this. And when a few things happened that I was, you know, I could control, like Sunday mornings. I used to do Sunday mornings on Radio 2, which I really enjoyed, but they put the start time back to 6 o'clock in the morning. And I just thought, I know I can't do that. I know that means getting up at 3:30, 4 o'clock on a Sunday morning. That's going to ruin my weekend, every weekend. Whereas I could cope with a 7 a.m. start. That was okay. I mean, getting in for 6:30, but not getting in for 5:30. It just made it, and I didn't want to do it. So I just said no. And having, that's a different kind of confidence. That's having the confidence to say, actually, that doesn't work for me. Much as I've liked doing it, enormous as Radio 2 is, you know, you think, oh my God, you give your right arm to present a program on Radio 2. Yes, I might have thought that once, but I'm not giving up my life for it. Yeah. And those are the things that you sort of you shift to a different position. So that didn't happen straight away after 2012. That happened more, gosh, when did I start doing? I probably stopped two years ago, stopped doing. And so I think that's the next phase of it. You go through, okay, I'm here, I'm me, I'm doing the thing I love. I hope I'm doing it well. I will continue to strive to do it well. To, gosh, there are lots of bright, shiny things I could try. And then, okay, what do I actually believe in? What matters to me? No to that. This is where I am. Yeah. And it's made, I don't know whether it's made lockdown actually easier to cope with, in that I'm really content in what I'm working on, and I'm giving it 100% commitment.
Yeah.
Focus.
And you know, going back to the kind of need to please, I always think it's a really interesting shift and application of that need to please when you think, okay, if I'm the best version of me doing the stuff that I want to do, I will give people the opportunity to be pleased by the right version of me, rather than me being some kind of chameleon to try and meet the perceived needs that I think they want from me as well. So it's really harnessing that need to please yourself first, to really sort of, you know, make people proud of the stuff that you want them to be proud of.
Yeah, and exactly, and to do that by doing things you're proud of. So my list of sort of questions now, if I get offered something, is it interesting? Am I going to be stimulated by this? Am I going to learn something? Is it going to be fun? Will I enjoy it? And then third, how much time is it going to take, and how will it impact on my life by doing that? And actually, generally speaking, if it's fun and it's interesting and exciting, the time spent on it will enhance my life, not take away from it.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. And I think it did that feel like you were getting good at that in the lead up to 2012 and being able to prioritize? Was there a trend in that direction, and 2012 happened to be the catalyst to really kind of giving you that extra confidence to have such, you know, precision in your decision making, or a more self-focused approach to it? Was it changing anyway?
No, weirdly, what happened after 2012 was suddenly, it was like I'd been you know, like I dropped in from Mars and suddenly
Right.
everybody realized I could present programs. So I got offered a lot and I turned down a lot. But what I did take was quite high profile, and some of it worked and some of it didn't. But it was interesting and different and fun. And I think what I got hurt by, in a way, was people saying, she's doing everything, you're on everything now. And they still say it now. I said, no, I've never had a daily program. Actually, I had a weekly program on the radio for a while, but you know, I'm not Jeremy Vine doing 2 shows a day and Eggheads. You know, it's like, there is a whole different scale of people who do loads more than me. But I think because I did lots of different things, because I could do the Queen's pageant and then I could flip and do, you know, crafts, and then I could do the Olympics, and then, you know, or Wimbledon, that you in a way you get a bit, because you're not doing the same thing every day, which people almost just regard as one thing. I was doing different things every day.
Yeah.
5 days a week.
And it feels like, from what you're saying as well, that shift towards being curious about how far you can stretch yourself, as well as kind of, you know, there's more safety in terms of, you know, I wonder, actually that's you know, that's a possibility, rather than, you know, perhaps keeping things contained. There's been more of a curiosity to sort of wonder and sort of, you know, explore a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, having the benefit now of being able to say, you know, I'm lucky in the sense that I've done enough interesting things, and because of writing books as well, that I've done extremely well, I don't have to make decisions anymore based on just the finances. So that makes a big difference in your head of saying, and quite often I'll say, please don't tell me what they're offering me, because I don't want to do it, so that it doesn't influence me. So it's not, you know, so I'm not thinking, oh my God, that was, you know, that was a lot of money.
Yeah, and really interesting, again, just sort of, you know, just the difference between the meaning to you rather than perhaps, you know, some external value. And the storytelling bit you mentioned as well really seems to fit together. Telling the stories, personal meaning, that feels like it's a very strong thread as well.
But it's, you know, God, I'm no saint. I haven't always, you know, let my morals speak. I mean, when you've got financial pressure and you've got a mortgage to pay and you're worried about how you're going to make, you know, ends meet, you will do things like write an article for a magazine that you are not sure that actually you believe in what you've written, and plenty of people do that. And that's really frustrating. And I read them sometimes and I just think, you don't believe this. You just don't believe this. You are writing this. And it happens on social media. I look at it and think, you are writing this to stoke up a reaction. And people do it as a sort of, you know, they are the professional pantomime villain. And it's quite a successful, you know, character to be, but it's not one that I want to be.
Yeah, which goes back to that authenticity again, I guess, as well, and kind of really feeling comfortable. You obviously reflect a lot. Have you got better at reflecting in order that it helps shape your next move better?
I'm good at it if I'm asked to do it.
Right. Okay.
And therefore, you know, you've made me. But generally, I don't sort of sit there looking back at things. I will sometimes. I think it does inform my decision making, and certainly in terms of the experience of having done the programs I've done and seen the things I've seen go right and wrong, informs my performance for sure. I can predict when things might happen that will, you know, that could be avoided, and I'll say so to an editor or director, just by the way, this might happen, so look out for it, and let's try and avoid it this time. They don't always like that being pointed out to them, but I tend not to. I tend actually to look forward too much, and actually what I'm practicing, and I think what's helping me during this period, is just being in the now. In the now. Knowing that I've got a routine to my day, and I'm really enjoying it, and I'm really enjoying today so far. And I've done things, and I've got things more to do this afternoon, and the sun is shining, and it's lovely, and Archie's not bothering us by barking, so it's all good. Yeah, and it's
again, you talking about the drive driving you previously, and then sort of that you're looking to the future a long way. For the athletes as well, there's the thing of outcome hijack. If their head's at the finish line all the time and they're sort of wondering, am I going to get the result that I want? It's really difficult to be present to sort of give the focus to the art of performance that's required to get themselves where they want to. And again, recognizing that challenge internally to kind of need the drive, but then focus it. Again, that's a real growth process as well.
I think as well, we can all be, busy fools. I think we can all feel that we're doing stuff, and therefore we're busy. Is it productive? Is it actually contributing to what you want to be at the end of the end of that day? Or are you just rushing around doing things for the sake of doing them? And that's, I'm not the best at doing nothing. I'm really not.
Okay.
So I like to do something, but that something could be gardening. It actually could be hoovering, which I'm very good at. It could be exercise. It could be walking. So that's it's getting better at that as well.
Yeah. And I think as well that part of that is, again, the curiosity to wonder how much better can I get, rather than a demand to be brilliant at it sort of straight away, particularly if not a preference.
Yes, and leaving yourself scope for being able to improve. You're not, certainly in live television, and I suspect the same with sport, you're never going to give the perfect performance. No program I've ever done has been perfect. Not if it's live, it can't be. There'll be slight glitches somewhere. You'll have asked a stupid question somewhere. You've gone to something, it's not there. You've given an incorrect fact. You've just slightly wished you'd done something differently. That happens a lot. Yeah. So you learn to live with the imperfection, and that makes, and then strive for it again. Of course you are. You're always searching for the Holy Grail.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always a worthwhile reminder that perfect is a noun, not a verb. Sorry, it's a perfect as a verb, not a noun. It's to perfect. Really interesting when you kind of start talking to people about, well, actually, the process of perfecting something is absolutely what you're looking at. But if you're demanding something to be perfect, that doesn't actually exist, other than as a kind of a grammatical reference. So it's really interesting, the whole perfectionism as well, which we could dive off into. But I wanted to ask you something else. Just sort of looking back, sort of, 2012, as you picked out that period, do you look back with a different view as well, in terms of some characteristics for yours that you're really proud of that were present then as well, and sort of that you've been able to kind of, build upon, and sort of you're thankful that they were present and really clear then as well?
Yeah, something I tell you, I know I've continued to do. That Olympics of 2012 was the first, really the first Twitter Olympics, right?
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And because a lot was going on, and I had a lot of information I needed to be doing homework on, and had notes all over the place, and I was really involved in all of the races and trying to make sure that people wanted to watch, even if there wasn't a British swimmer in the final, which quite often there wasn't. I made the decision then to engage in social media in the sense of putting up photos and giving people a little view behind the scenes and all of that, and having fun, but not to look at the mentions, and also not to look at any newspaper coverage that was about the TV coverage, because I knew it was going to be a big story. All the foreign press were here as well. You're broadcasting not just to your own audience, but also to the leading American broadcasters. You want to be good. You want to show them that we do it differently, but hopefully it's fun. And I remember on the final Sunday, I was doing some prep for the modern pentathlon, and I opened the Sunday Times, and I happened to see an article, but I didn't read it, that was about medals for presentation. And I got a very good mention. So I texted my mother to say, and my mother's not interested in newspaper coverage of me, I promise you. I mean, literally couldn't have less interest, but I knew that if I asked her to, she'd go and get the paper and she would save it for me. So I just said, look, can you get hold of the Sunday Times for me, and will you hang on to it? And she texted back, she said, don't read it. I said, no, don't worry, I haven't. And she said, but I've kept all the others as well. And I was like, what others? I had no idea. And then I went on, Chris Evans was doing a show, must have been doing his radio show from there, and he suddenly said to me, you're getting all the plaudits. And I said, am I? He said, you must know. And I said, no. I genuinely didn't know. And I realized then what a fantastic position to be in, because whether it's really good as it was then, or whether it's really bad, you don't need to know.
No.
It doesn't affect, it's not going to impact my performance in a good way. And so after that, I've never looked at Twitter mentions whenever I'm doing a high profile program of a big audience, you know, whether it's Wimbledon or Olympics, whatever it is. I just don't look at that, because I don't need, you know, I don't need the affirmation and I don't need the criticism. I will talk to people, you know, Alice will tell me if there's something that I can correct, that I've done wrong, that needs to be corrected, she'll tell me. But I don't look to it to somehow give me, I don't know what the word is, but you'd know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, that's probably reflective of you knowing your own standards and wanting to judge yourself by what you see as the benchmark, rather than, you know, assuming that other people might have a benchmark that takes into account the same stuff that you do. And, you know, that's part of the difficulty here for the athletes as well as, you know, people in the public eye. Your version of brilliance is the one that is worth paying attention to because of the understanding you have.
But it's also, I've seen how distracting and destructive it can be. I've seen people change mid-program because they've read something on Twitter, and I thought, why would you let yourself do that? And you know, I've seen it with athletes as well, and it's something that almost we're going to have to learn to train people for how to cope with it. You know, my attitude might not be the greatest one, it might not be the answer, but it works for me. And I believe, again, it's about taking control of it. And actually, I get a weird sense of satisfaction from having the power to resist. I quite like it. People go, you must have looked. I said, no, I haven't.
And from the you know, Sydney Olympics, one of the recommendations for the athletes that I've had the privilege of supporting, it was, you know, you go and exploit the Olympics, don't let it exploit you. What do you want to find out about yourself? What do you want to test out? Because there's a bunch of stuff there that could happen that might seem different, that could get you changing your mind, having done, you know, a lifetime of work to go and find out, you know, what it can do for you. Don't let it change, you know, the picture. So it's getting that position of strength from the very outset. It's brilliant, Claire. I'm very mindful of time. I'm just wondering, has thinking about today, talking through this, what does this do for you? Is there anything that is interesting as you reflect upon the reflection?
It makes me want to hear what others have to say, and
okay.
And I, in fact, actually tell you, Kath Bishop, who rode with Catherine Granger, who you'll have known, has just written a really, really interesting book about what is success. How do we define it? Do we need to look at it differently? And I find all of that fascinating, because people have a different life experience to me, obviously, and everyone has a different life experience. And I think learning from other people is a really useful thing to do. And therefore, in that sense, in me being honest about my approach, maybe that, you know, gives other people a chance to go, well, that's interesting, maybe I could try some of that. Or indeed, it helps me to listen to others to saying, no, I could try, you know, I can just tweak that a bit. But I do think it is, whatever your, you know, whether you're a teacher or a doctor or a lawyer or a presenter or an athlete or anything, it doesn't matter what your job is, being confident in yourself and being happy with yourself and is crucial. And I think that's the one thing I've really enjoyed, being proud to be happy. I am proud to be happy. I am proud to have a fantastic relationship and a, you know, great job and very you know, fantastic friends, and equally, I'm happy to be proud, if you see what I mean. I'm happy to be to talk honestly about my relationship, about my work, about who I really am, and I think that's different. I'm not sure I was always like that.
Yeah, and I've seen a draft of Cass' book as well, and it will be very worthwhile reading when it comes out, definitely. But you just remind me there about the, you know, the difference that trying to play without fear is very different from actually playing with freedom. so that the playing with freedom is the thing that you're looking for. Because if you're trying to play without fear, that's you're trying to stop something happening rather than stepping into something, and that's that sums up for me beautifully what you were talking about. So we'll come to the end, and I'm delighted that it's helped the confidence and the ability for you to sort of enjoy the happiness that's been created and carry on creating and telling us brilliant stories. As we got into podcast relay, time for your handover. So I'm fascinated to find out who you're handing over to and why, and what you're maybe curious about finding out from the next person.
Okay, I've picked an athlete who I greatly admire for her sporting skill, but I think I might admire her even more for the conservation work that she has done and that she's thrown herself into. And it's Krista Cullen, who was part of the hockey gold medal winning team in Rio, but her story's really interesting because she had retired and then was coaxed back in, and as the sort of senior member, slightly brought in, and obviously someone else is going to lose their place because she comes in. How did she feel about that? And also her second life, her other life in Kenya. And I've been to Kenya with her and her family. I've seen her in that environment. It's where she is now. It's where you'll talk to her from. And I just think the life that she's lived is so different from most people within British sport that I think she'd have some really interesting things to say.
Yeah, no, that sounds fantastic as well. And kind of knowing that obviously Krista was part of the 2012 team, and getting that sort of step in the right direction, and then sort of that'll be fantastic listening to that. And to Fauti, her organisation, so that's a nice link. So we've actually had an association with a cycling team that set up with him as well. So that is great. So that'll be interesting to sort of make a bit of a connection there as well. So I will hope we can get the technology working from here to Kenya then, if that's where she is. So hugely appreciative of that baton handover. Superbly done. And just lastly, thank you hugely for your openness and your brilliance, and really look forward to seeing the books that are coming out. Look forward to sort of hearing everything that's coming next. And you've got a virtual pub quiz as well, I think, as well. How's that going?
I did that earlier this week for the Charlie Waller Memorial Trust, and Charlie was a guy who just a little bit older than me, but I knew his brothers actually, and he. Nobody really realised he was suffering from depression, and he took his own life when he was 27. And his family set up a trust all around mental health, and particularly focused on young people, and in trying to help people help themselves, but also to recognise when someone might be in a bit of trouble, and they produce a whole load of free literature and online counselling as well. But it's just a very small, very focused charity, and so we did this big quiz on Tuesday night, which was interesting. Lots of people. I did a section on breeds of dog, and they were all Crufts winners, actually, all the different breeds, and loads of people saying that was way too difficult. I'm like, well, you must have got the Whippet and the West Highland Terrier. Come on, okay, the Papillon's a bit random, but.
Well, it's a shame I couldn't get my Brittany to come and visit during the course of this.
Oh, I love a Brittany.
Maybe next time. So mad as a box of frogs, but just delightful as well. But Claire, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the long holiday weekend as well. And huge thanks to everyone. And if you need anything in return, absolutely just ask. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Bye-bye.